Okay, good afternoon. Welcome all for the Devsecops Engineering and Automation talk. So the agenda for today's topics are including the Devsecops Introduction, the workflow, the 7 key factors for implementing the DevSecOps, best practices, implementation process, the benefits of the DevSecOps, what are the challenges that we encounter and how to overcome, and finally, we will conclude the session with DevSecOps engineer, be hireable. So what are the essential skills are required for your marketability? So the introduction to the DevOps is a way of approaching our IT security. We found everyone is responsible for security mindset. It involves injecting the security practices into the organization DevOps pipeline. This involves fostering the culture of the flexibility and ongoing collaboration between the development and security teams and incorporating the security protocols into the development process. The workflow, so we have various elements. Commit, so the developers create the code in the repository and commit their changes. Analyze, another developer pull the code from the version control repository and perform the static analysis or the peer review to identify the security issues or any other defects. The setup environment, if the code passes a static analysis, an environmental is automatically spins up, so deployed in containers with configuration managed by the infrastructure as a core tools. Then we will carry out the test activities. So having the test build system, execute the test suite, including the unit test, the functional test, the user interface automation testing, the integration test, and also the security test. Deploy, if all the tests pass, the newer version is promoted to the production environment. So after the deployment, we will continuously monitor. So the new production version is monitored and identify any security threats. And then we will actually repeat the process. So upon identifying the security issues, we will raise a change request for the software or any other defects or any other feature enhancement requests. We will create the new version of the code and commits into the repository and restarting the development lifecycle. So the DevOps landscape, the 7 key factors for implementing the DevSecOps. So we will use the interactive application security testing to avoid the false positive and tuning the static application security testing. So the IAST and SAST and DAST, all these are the common practices in our dev security ops. Okay. So integrating the security flaws into the collaboration tool to improve the coordination, define the metrics and threshold to ensure the quality if the deployment rates are accelerate, automating the design error protection to reduce the manual verification. So follow the penetration testing, adapt the continuous reporting to gain the visibility on the security history from our audit trial, integrating the security into the application to improve the cloud support, ensuring that the linear scalability and affordable cost. So there are 12 DevSecOps, the best practices. So I will actually give more explanations about all these 12 pointers, because if I put all the text, then it become more clumsy. And so the DevSecOps culture. So simply having the correct DevSecOps practices and capabilities will not be adequate if the company culture, so which is a built-in process across all the aspects of the business, and prevent such practices and capabilities are being appropriately leveraged. And historically, the security team has a bottleneck in the release process. So they become the department of no. And as a result, they become marginalized over time, reinforcing the downward cycle of the team disintegrations. So the DevSecOps is striving to break down these boundaries and prevent the security from the one member, as well as we want to go ahead with establishing the policies and the infrastructure without compromising the whole business. So when the DevSecOps is fully implemented, there is no longer a single security team, but rather than it's a company-wide security attitude and mindset that is always in the development process. The second one is adapt the threat modeling. So it actually helps to define the security requirements, creating the application diagram, identifying the threats and mitigating the threats, validating the threats that have been mitigated. So before we shift to the DevSecOps, it is highly recommended to do the baseline threat modeling and conduct a thorough risk assessment. So the threat modeling exercise can assist the security organizer in a better way to understand the existing threats, to the assess and any gaps in a security control that need to be assessed. So other security approaches may have missed problems in the architecture during the design and delivering the applications during the design and code development. But the threat modeling can assist to discover them in the early phase of the life cycle. Automation is the key when it comes to the balancing the security integration with speed and scalability. So the automation is very essential. So the DevOps automation is already adapted the prioritization of the automation. So the DevSecOps also, we need to follow this automation suit. So the teams can adapt the DevSecOps practices by adapting the security tools and processes. So the automation guarantee the tool that process are used in a consistent, repeatable, and reliable manner. It is critical to figure out which security operations and processes can be totally automated and which one requires human interventions or the human interactions. So running the static application security testing, the SAS tool in a pipeline, for example, can be completely automated. However, the threat modeling and the penetration testing involve the human intervention. So we will actually intervene by the manual method, and which cannot be able to fully automated because the security experts are able to navigate through the system. So the same can be set procedure in a pipeline. So sending the inputs to the stakeholders can be automated. However, the security sign-offs require some user effort. The item number 4, keep check the coding practices. So all the coding standards must be reviewed against updated security recommendations on a regular basis. So setting up event-driven is a great approach and uncover the vulnerabilities as quickly as possible. So there is a large difference between the finding the issues on day one versus the day zero. So in this context, our clean code development approach, what we are heavily practicing in our agile development practices, especially for the DevOps engineering days. And then we try to adapt the similar method for our clean code development approach practices here by adding the security components. So all the code modifications must be checked and tested against the security guidelines. So no changes too minor throughout this process. This is not a simple task, and the advantages of such techniques should not be overlooked. So they are not limited to the number of modification requests that occur during the development process. Number 5, consider the host hardening. So the host hardening consists of removing the unnecessary applications, looking unnecessary ports and services, tightly controlling on any external storage device that are going to be connected to the host, and disabling the unneeded account to the systems, remaining the default accounts and changing the default password. So the host hardening is not a novel concept, but if you are employed more frequently, so we are with a fewer services and applications would be exposed to the internet unnecessarily. Most of the security loopholes can be linked to the leaving the generic attack surface that allows the automated attack tooling the succeed in the event of the most basic attacks. So using the security capabilities are essential to the operating systems. Example like essential security modules in a Linux, and minimizing the attack surface by not installing or executing anything that is not essential for the main application make that work easier. The item number 6, utilize CI/CD for the patching. So with the help of the CI/CD pipelines, the patching lives is no longer necessary, reducing the important of the downtime, and it's also reduce the risk exposure and help to determine the real time, near real time. So then the vulnerability patching would be no longer to have a monthly hassle, or if it's were included in our CI/CD pipeline, it will be just integrated the way the software is delivered. So the item number 7, audit and scan the applications. So auditing and scanning are the critical parts of the DevSecOps that helps the business to understand the risk exposure completely and indicated the organization risk desired. So the appropriate scanning and periodic auditing represent the higher level of the code security assurance. The item number 8, the scan the source code thoroughly. So the source code should be scanned thoroughly by implementing the SAST. So the SAST method, we can able to apply the software composition analysis techniques that scan the source code repository, usually the master branch for the vulnerabilities, and does a software composition analysis. It can be included in the existing CI/CD operations. Item number 9, the dynamic application scanning tool, the DAS. So it actually designed to scan the live staging and production website in order for us to identify the vulnerabilities in the input fields, the forms, and other parts of the web applications, including the transactions. So it is critical to understand that whenever we allow the users to provide the data, so example in the form of the field or query strings or HTTP server, all this. So we are allowing them to provide the data on the web server or application code. We have to deal with that. So the item number 10 is a pre-deployment auditing is a must. So to ensure the desired level of the security, the pre-deployment auditing becomes the must in the software development lifecycle. So this is compared to our traditional physical configuration audit. So we are adding the elements of the security elements over here. So the check is event-driven, meaning it is triggered when the target code is modified. So since this is a last chance before the exit validation, so we have to prohibit it for the required to be integrated into the CI/CD pipeline. So this idea can be applied in the IAC, the infrastructure as a code, to improve the compliance by assuring not just the software but also the infra on which it is deployed. So it's compliant by default. So this method of auditing also has an advantage of involving the security teams early in the software development process rather than waiting until the end of the announced requirements. Post-deployment auditing is important. So when compared to the pre-deployment auditing, the post-deployment auditing is also the event-driven, but the event-driven triggers include both the policy and code modifications. So the check is triggered when with either the modifications of the infrastructures or the standards, then the regulation need to met. So the goal of the post-deployment audit is to guarantee that the certified security levels that we could able to obtain during the pre-deployment auditing is still valid and appropriate, and we can able to establish and maintain it. As a result, the number of post-deployment tests frequently, so the outnumbers the number of pre-deployment tests. The item number 12, the last item, the scan the external vulnerabilities. So look into the network from the outside to find, identify, and help to close the potential external entry points for unwanted disturbance. So it actually start looking at the weakness of the network's firewall, and it also tests the external network perimeters and outside the IP address. By doing these scans, we are taking the proactive approach to protecting the network. So the external scans reveals in the network that could lead to the security breach. We may quickly discover the most critical issues within the network by looking at from the perspective. So we may also see that whether the new services or servers have been installed since the last check, and if they pose any new threats to the organizations. So the conclusion by having these best practices, so transforming the company to DevSecOps is a massive project that comes with many known and unforeseen problems and the risk. So it is vital to remember that DevSecOps is not one size fit for all the solutions or the golden pipeline. It will need to have a plan, making it really for the organizations. So following the above method, best practices can certainly can go along. and along the way we can able to continuously improve. So the DevSecOps, the implementation process. So here you can see that the implementation process actually start from the planning. Then we will develop the components. Then we will actually do this build. Then do the continuous testing. Then have these security elements. Then we will go for a deployment to the production. So then the deployment, you could able to go with many type of your releases. So it could be the application service provider model, or go for a virtual releases, or cloud hosting, and press the CD-ROM and pass the customer to install in their locations, or go with on-prem. So there are different several methods you can go for a deployment process. Then we will do the monitoring of the production process, and then we will do this scaling up and optimizing. Then what are the additional changes that are coming up, so we could able to identify them and bring them into the our agile development product backlog, and then have this sprint backlog, and then we will continuously follow this same path. So it actually helps for us to do the release planning stage. So then the release planning stage will actually help to do the productization, and what are the business requirements and business cases. Then we actually convert them into the user stories, and then we will continuously develop by using our the planning strategies. So all these are our organizational context method, and this is a generic DevSecOps, the implementation process. So what are the benefits that we can able to look at by implementing the DevSecOps? So we can able to early identify and fixing of the code vulnerabilities, and we could able to get a faster response to evolving and changing the customer demands and needs, because we are actually adapting the agile practices, the agile mindset, the CI/CD practices, and increase automation, especially for the testing and the build automation, and seamless cloud deployment. Okay, then flexible communications between the engineers and IT security teams. So because we are actually talking about the collaborative culture, and have this transparency, and there is visualizations by seeing the development and deployment activities. So what are the challenges and how to overcome these DevSecOps challenges? So the skill gap is a very prime. And so as I have mentioned the slide number 7, so related to the best DevSecOps practices. So all those the issues have been addressed over there. So the skills need to be improved, and cloud deployment risk. And then we have this serverless security issues, and legacy application security risk, and how to overcome. So if you are putting the project from one development technologies to the another technologies, and how we are going to deal with that, and for the existing application system, how we can able to adapt this DevSecOps for our legacy systems, and container security risk. So all these are the challenges which can be overcome from the earlier topics. So the best practices which I have mentioned earlier. So the DevSecOps engineer be hireable. So the role of the DevSecOps engineer demands a few supplementary skill set. So the thorough knowledge of the DevOps principle, practices, and culture is essential, and I have a strong understanding of the scripting language such as Python, Java, and Ruby, and proficient with Chef, Puppet, Container, Docker, Kubernetes, and microservices. So from monolithic development approach, when we are especially going to this DevOps, you need to learn about microservices, and then the threat modeler and cybersecurity threats, and experience in cloud hosting services, example for your AWS, Azure, or Google Cloud Platform. So these are the essential skills are required to be a successful DevSecOps engineer. And we have launched the course for DevSec engineers and automation. So you can able to refer our NES website. You can get more details about our schedules, and what are the learning objectives, and what are the prerequisite. So in terms of your the competency level, the prerequisite, as well as what to bring to the class. And then how we actually conduct the class. Also, we actually given the syllabus over there. So from this link, and this syllabus actually include both learning the practice, and then we will actually put them into the workshops. So the continuously on all the 5 days program from the day one, we will continuously learn the concept and reflect them in the form of the workshop. So then over the period of time, we will actually able to build the full cloud hosting on the day 5. And also it includes the individual quiz assessment. So whatever the practices and the workshop that we have actually implemented in a course. And post course also we will actually provide the support. So after you have attended the course and how you want to impart the knowledge and skills into the projects as well as your work areas, we will actually help you to do the handholding. So if you are taking some initiatives and approaches on whether you are in the right directions or you are stuck somewhere, so you are looking for some help, so we are always available to help you. Okay, thank you for your time.